we start today where Tiffany, we start with Tiffany. We take off where Tiffany ended last week, and we're going to talk about Joshua part 2. I call this The Conquest Begins, because this is what they're getting ready to do. They're getting ready to engage in a conquest of many, many battles, many, many fights. Something that they've only done a couple times with the kings on the other side of the Jordan, and Sihon and Og, the kings that they've engaged in. But this is really the first time that Joshua has led a fight. Joshua's really, he's been Moses' second in command. Now he's in charge. And if a commander takes that responsibility very heavily. I had a commander when I was in Iraq that it took him days to make a decision on a mission, because his philosophy was, if we go into this fight, have I done everything possible to keep everybody alive? And if somebody dies, can I look into their family's face and tell them I've done everything possible to bring them home and to keep, and this mission was worth the risk. So when you go into a fight, they're doing all kind of analogies and a decision-making matrix and process to make sure, at least for a modern day, to make sure that people can survive. Of course, it's crazier today than it was back then because of the weapons that we use and that kind of thing. So this was on Joshua's shoulders. You had men that had wives and children and moms and dads that were getting ready to get into hand-to-hand, basically, combat and could die. And then he's got to answer to these folks for this. So the conquest begins. And we're going to start out with the fall of Jericho in Joshua chapter 1, 1 through 27. So I want to give you some historical information here. The name Jericho means moon or new moon, so called because of the crescent-like plain in which it stood, formed by an amphitheater on the hill of the hills surrounding it. Some think the name derived from the word ruach, which the word ruach also means spirit, but in this case, it's meaning smell or fragrance, referring to the many balsam trees, palm trees in the city, and you can find that in Deuteronomy 34:3. It's one of the oldest fortified cities in the ancient Near East, long identified with Tel Es-Satan, which is springs around the area. It's 6 miles north of the Dead Sea, about 750 feet below sea level. As again we talked about, the plentiful supply of water is there. It turned Jericho into an oasis, and indeed the Bible once referred to it as the city of palms. And it's Tel Es-Sultan, another name for Jericho. It rises 65 feet above the surrounding plain and occupies an area of 10 acres. So that's why it was very popular, because it ain't like today where you had water pumped into your house. You had to go get it. In the desert, if there's not water, Joseph talked about this a few weeks ago, you will die. You got to have water every so many days. You can go without food for 10 days or more, 40 days even. Jesus fasted for 40 days. But water you got to have. You can't go without water. So, this is a kind of a picture of what they think Jericho looked like, but it was during the Bronze Age, and the Bronze Age was simply when they used tools and weapons that replaced earlier stone versions of ancient Cimmerians in the Middle East. It replaced the stone versions, and it's in ancient Near East, and have been the first. They were the first people. These ancient Cimmerians were the first people to enter the Bronze Age, and it started around 33 BC and ended around 1200 BC. They believe, and the Bible puts the date around 14 BC when Jericho was attacked, but other excavators and the historians would say it was in 15 or 1499 BC, but they based this on the calculations of 1 Kings, which stated that 480 years had passed between the Exodus and the building of Solomon's temple, and that's how they dated it when Joshua and them went into Jericho. So Jericho was straightly shut up. We find this in the 6:1. Why was Jericho straightly shut up?
They were scared of them.
They were what?
They were scared of them.
Okay, what else?
Didn't they hear about what all, long ago, this was scary when they heard about the Red Sea and everything.
Yes, and they heard about what else?
They knew spies had been there.
Yes. And the Jordan dried up. They had good memories because 40 years earlier the Red Sea had grown up and they walked through and people remembered that. Rahab mentioned that kind of stuff. They also heard about Og and Bashan, the king of, those kings that were destroyed. They were great cities. So God allowed things to happen to put fear in Jericho's, so that they would be afraid. Because when you put fear there, you win half the battle. People are afraid. There was fear in Iraq in 2003 when we went in. That there was such fear that they threatened to launch chemical weapons when we went through the Kabbalah Gap, which we thought was going to happen but didn't happen because the guy that was over that chemical Ali, they caught him, he was killed. So there was fear. And then that's why they wanted to get the spies too when they went to Rahab's house, because they wanted you get intel from these spies and find out what the battle plan was and what was going to happen, how they were going to attack the city. And it wasn't a normal attack, as we'll see in just a few minutes. God says in 6:2, see, I have given into thine hand Jericho. I've given you Jericho. I've already fought the battle. I've already put fear in their heart. I already know I've given you the battle. Now the strange things was the marching orders. You get orders and you follow orders in the military. You have to follow orders, especially in a combat situation. Why?
Keep people safe.
Yep. Why else? It's the opposite of that. If people fail to follow orders, you get people killed.
Right.
People die when you don't follow orders. You have to follow orders in a combat situation or people will die. And you may not understand the orders. You may not understand what's being told to you. I think I told the story, but we were in Iraq. I don't know where we were at, but our company commander calls me and says, Chaplain, I need you to bring the convoy down the hill. And I'm hearing tanks roll by me on the left. It's dark. We're driving with nods, which is the night goggles and all, and can't see nothing. You don't know if the tanks you're hearing are the enemy or it's your folks. And I'm like, no, I'm not moving this convoy until I know where I'm going. It's my responsibility. I don't want to get nobody killed. Finally was able to see the commander's vehicle, and we led down the hill. So you got to follow orders, but you got to be wise in following orders as well. So what does God tell Joshua to do in the orders?
Don't march around the city and not say anything.
Right. What do you think God told him to shut up? Because Israel had a habit of complaining and griping and being negative. What did that complaining and griping and negative get them when the 12 spies went into the land?
Wandering in the desert for 40 more years.
Yeah, it got them wandering for 40 years. And God is like, Joshua's saying, no, don't say nothing. I don't care what you think, just don't say nothing. The Bible says there's power of life and death in the tongue. Don't say anything. God says to him, you got to march around the walls. That is not a typical way to fight a battle. You usually engage the enemy. But God's telling them to march. Now, I did some research yesterday. One person said it was like almost a half a mile around, but I also have read in the past where they said it was a 7-mile march. Half a mile to 7 miles. I don't know, somewhere in between. But just think about that, marching even for a half a mile, carrying the ark and blowing trumpets, and you're some distance from the walls. You're not at the walls. Why wouldn't you be closer to the walls?
You could get killed.
Yeah, you'd be attacked with arrows or other things that they use to attack people. So they had to be far enough away from the wall where they couldn't be attacked. What do you think was going on in the city when they were marching around the wall?
People are laughing.
Oh, I think the people were laughing at them. Look at them dumb Israelites. Look how stupid they are. How in the world are they going to fight us? Why are we afraid? Do you think that them marching around the walls could have built courage with the people in Jericho? That they were untouchable? That they weren't going to come in?
I think they were afraid just by what we know already from what
Mhm.
Rahab had said, so I bet they were really confused.
Mhm. I think so too, because it was a weird way to fight a battle. It was a weird way. If we would have went into Iraq and just marched around the country or flew planes around the country and then not do anything, what do you think the folks would have thought?
But you're never
Like,
gonna
what are
understand.
y'all doing? This ain't the way you fight a fight. And then, I mean, back then it wasn't the way you fought fights, and fight battles. And then on the seventh day, they marched how many times? Seven. What's the significance of the number seven?
7 days.
Completion is God's number. And at the end, and Joshua said, don't say a word till I tell you to do it. And when I tell you to do it, you are to shout. For God has given you the city. And I tell you, if I were out there marching, I'd probably think, what in the world? Because God didn't speak to everybody. He just spoke to Joshua. It's not like these orders were given from, like he was on when he was on Horeb, when he came down on Horeb and he started speaking to everybody. He only spoke to Joshua. What are you doing, Joshua? What kind of craziness is this that's going on? What are you doing in this fight? But they had to have faith. And when God gives us, it's an application for us, when God gives us marching orders, we got to have faith. Because faith is things of substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. We don't see things sometimes, but we just operate on faith. We move when God tells us to move. God gives us a message to preach. If you're preaching or teaching and you preach it and you wonder, I go to the pulpit sometime with my mind on 2 or 3 different messages and I like, God, is this the right message? But he ends up moving. You just trust in him. You trust him to do what he says he will do. So the marching orders. So in Joshua gave marching orders to the priest and to the people in 6, 7, and 8. How would you think, I know the Bible doesn't say this, but in your mind, what do you think these people said? We talked about a little bit. What do you think they were thinking when he gave them these marching orders?
That's not gonna work.
Yeah, it could be negativity. That's not going to work. But we know it did. And the city was passed 6 times, each day, and on the 7th, 7 times, Joshua 8, 6 through 18, it was compassed. And they marched and they obeyed. So this is kind of a picture I found. I like pictures. They speak 1,000 words. And they're carrying this ark. That ark was heavy. The 10 Commandments was in there. Aaron's rod was in there. And manna was in there. And they were marching behind the priest. I believe there was a little bit more distance between the ones blowing the horns and those that, those that were carrying the ark. There was some distance there between them and all. So these were what they're doing. They're marching. And then the walls fall. And I hope I can get this right. It talks about Rahab's saved, but I got a video that I want to play if I can get it right. It's just a short one.
Found that the city wall did not in this area. So that provides an explanation for how the spies could have saved Rahab and her family, because God brought the wall down everywhere else except where her house was, and we have archaeological evidence to back that up. They found that the city wall did not.
I thought that was pretty cool. That these archaeological people had found in a certain place in Jericho where the wall didn't fall, but all the other walls fell. So that's possibly how Rahab was saved. God worked a miracle to keep her and her family from being killed and all. And God can do things like that. I don't know how the wall fell flat. I mean, there's a couple ways that it just fell outwards. God could open the earth like he did when he swallowed up some of the Israelites and let it sunk down. I don't know. But they do these archaeological digs and they find these things and it backs up. I mean, the Bible's true regardless, but to the atheist and the agnostic and the people who don't believe, it backs it up. It backs up what the scriptures say. So Joshua had said, go into the harlot's house and bring out thence the woman and all that she had. So she did her job by not turning the spies in and not telling the king. And God protected her and her family, and as was talked about last week, Rahab is in the lineage of the Messiah, as well as Bathsheba and Ruth, who was also a Gentile. So they brought out all her kindred and left them without the camp of Israel, and then they destroyed the rest of the city in Joshua 6 and 23. They burned the city and all that was therein in Joshua 6 and 24. And she, Rahab, dwelleth into Israel unto this day, the scripture says. So she was a proponent that God used to help Israel win the battle. God can use anybody, anytime, any place, if they're willing to be used, if they want to be used. It doesn't matter your family history. It doesn't matter what you have in the bank or don't have. It doesn't matter what kind of education you do or don't have. As long as you are willing to allow God to use you, God is willing to use you. And then we finish up this chapter where it talks about Joshua adjured them at that time not to rebuild. God said, "Cursed be the man that rises up and buildeth this city. He shall lay the foundation thereof in his firstborn, and in his youngest son shall set up the gates." And I had a scripture that backed that up. And all because there was a scripture later on, and I don't know how it fell off my slide, but it talked about the guy that built the city, how that happened. His first son died and his youngest son was killed, rebuilding Jericho. So God backs up what he says, and God does what he says. We just got to know that God will do what he says. And then we talk about Achan. Sin causes Israel's defeat at Ai. The children of Israel committed a trespass in the accursed thing. So one man made a decision, it cost everybody else a defeat and cost people their lives. In battle, that's why people have got to follow orders and do what they're called to do, because it can cause somebody else to get killed. By not doing the right thing and not following orders, people can die. So in this thing, the whole children of Israel were punished. But as you read in chapter 8 of Joshua, I want you to think about some things. Quintel, do you got chapter 8, please? Read verses 1 through 5.
And the Lord said unto Joshua, "Fear not, neither be thou dismayed. Take all the people of war with thee, and arise, go up to Ai. See, I have given into the hand of the king of Ai, and his people, and his city, and his name. And thou shalt do to Ai and her king as thou doest unto Jericho and her king. Only the spoil thereof and the cattle thereof shall ye take for prey unto yourselves. Lay thee an ambush for the city behind you." Joshua rose and all the people of war to go up against Ai, and Joshua chose out 30,000 men of valor and set them away by night. And he commanded them, saying, "Behold, ye shall lie in wait against the city, even behind the city. Go not very far from the city, but be ye all ready. And I and all the people that are with thee will approach unto the city, and it shall come to pass, when they come out against us, as at the first, that we will flee before them."
I'm sorry, I got ahead. Chapter 7, we'll get there. But when they first went into Ai and they were defeated, what was the difference between when they went into Jericho and when they went into Ai?
They didn't wait for God to tell them how to fight the battle.
That's right. God told them what to do. And what else did they do? They only sent a few men. They got overconfident. And they didn't ask God, did anybody take of the accursed thing? Or should we go ahead and fight these folks? And so when they did that, because that Achan had did what he did, and he took that Babylonian garment, 200 shekels of silver and a wedge of gold worth 50 shekels of weight, And many theologians or commentators believe that his family was privy to it, knew what he did, and didn't say nothing about it. They kept their mouth shut. That's why they ended up, all of them, being killed. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to point out that it was really clear, the instruction from the Lord in 6:18, that they were not supposed to take anything.
You're right,
It
right.
wasn't like there was confusion, like,
Right.
wonder if we can take some home, you know?
Right.
God said, keep yourselves from the accursed thing, lest you make yourselves accursed. When you take of the accursed thing and make the camp a visual of the curse and trouble it, all the silver, gold vessels of brass and iron are consecrated unto the Lord, and shall come into the treasury of the Lord.
Right.
So they were supposed to take it all and take it for their temple, it sounds like to me.
And everything else is supposed to be burned, like the Babylonian garment or whatever, it was supposed to be
Yeah.
burned. And that kind of thing. You're right. And yeah, there was no confusion in the order. When we're given orders, sometimes orders are given, they're ambiguous sometimes.
Right.
But this wasn't ambiguous, it was straightforward. But what does the Bible say about the lust of the eyes? He saw these things. Maybe his family was poor, I don't know. And he's like, I can have something. Nobody will know.
Right.
But God's eyes run to and fro in all the earth. And so he did this, and it cost men their lives when they went to Ai. But of course, again, as she sister said, they didn't ask God, what's next? What do we need to do next? They just went and did it. And because they were cursed, God took his hand off of them. They lost the fight. No, they didn't know. But if, we don't know sometime, but I think if we seek God, maybe God will give us direction, or will give us direction. So they went, lost. How do you think that affected the morale in Israel when they went to Ai, which was a smaller city than Jericho, and they were defeated? What was the morale? It's like, God, and they said, the scripture says that like we should have stayed on the other side of Jordan. Israel. It's just Israel's way of talking.
Yeah.
What'd they say in the wilderness when they had a hard
Stayed
time?
in Egypt.
Yeah, we're in Egypt. We had food, but forgot about the whip of the taskmaster. So they were saying here too, it goes through verse in chapter 7, that we should have just stayed on the other side. We're getting defeated. Have you ever felt that way at times? I should have just stayed where I was at. I should have just stayed in where I was at, because I went further, and all I do is fight these battles, and I feel like I'm defeated. People, correlate that kind of with Jonah. Comes to mind. People ask, why did Jonah run? Well, when you get called of God to do something, the enemy's going to fight you that much harder. The Lord spoke to me a couple of weeks ago and said, the closer you get to me, the more the enemy's going to fight you. And the closer you get to me, the further you get from other people. And so, when you do what God tells you to do, you're going to have a fight on your hands. And then there's going to be fights that you feel like you lose, that you're not winning. You might lose a fight, but in the end you can win the war. Because Jesus has already won the war. It's already written in the back of the book. So, but anyway, they didn't ask God. They lost the battle. This whole situation through chapter 7 was Achan. They cast lots. They find Achan. They take him outside the camp. Joshua's falling down before the ark. He's putting ashes, him and the elders on, in sackcloth, which is a sense of mourning and humility and all that. God tells them to get up, that Israel has sinned, and this is how, and you need to go find who sinned. God didn't tell him who it was, but Joshua talked Achan into confessing. I mean, it's like Joshua was nice at one time, he talked him into confessing, and then he gets mad. You see the change in his tone. Come on, confess, Achan. You know you did this, and all that. And when Achan confesses, then he gets angry. And so he takes Achan and everything he has, everything, the animals, his wife, his children, and they stone them and they burn them, and they put a heap of stones on them, and all that, and all out, and they bound in the valley of Achor, which means trouble. So that's where that comes from, because Achan caused trouble upon the children of Israel, stopped their momentum. John Maxwell in his leadership talks about the law of the big Mo, And that means momentum. They had momentum going their way, but the momentum was staunch because of what Achan had done. And then this is a picture of what they think it looked like that some artists drew of Ai, them going to Ai and destroying Ai and all. So and Quintel read in chapter 8 what God told him to do. Do you think there was some fear? God says, fear not, neither be thou dismayed. Take all the people of war, not just a few. But I thought that was ironic how they only sent a few before. But God's telling them, take all the people of war and arise and go up to Ai. For I have given into thy hand the king of Ai and the people of the city. How do you think the people felt when God said to go, but they just got defeated just a little bit before that? I'm trying to make application of how it would affect us in our modern time.
I don't think they'd be sure.
I think they would second guess themselves. Maybe even second guess Joshua as a leader. Joshua told them to go the first time with just a few. People got killed and they lost. Now Joshua's telling them to go back. You think they might second guess their leader?
Mm-hmm.
Some, not all. And then Joshua arose, and all the people of war arose up. And notice what God told them to do. God gave them a different battle plan this time. Joshua chose out 30,000 mighty men of valor and sent them away by night. And he commanded them, saying, behold, you shall lie in wait until against the city, even behind the city. Go not very far from the city, but be ye ready. They couldn't see at night like we can today. They didn't have nods like we have, night vision goggles. They didn't have that stuff, so they couldn't see. So Joshua sent them back, and God had already told them to lay in wait, to set an ambush. And he commanded them, saying, behold, you shall lie in wait against the city, even behind the city. Go not very far from the city, but be ye ready. And I and all the people that are with me. So Joshua is I think he's coming with the same amount of people that came the first time, and to trick them into coming out of the city. And they said, we're going to flee before them as at first time. And when they come out after us, and we'll draw them away from the city, and then we'll flee. They will flee before us at the first. Therefore we will flee before them. And then you shall rise up and ambush from the city, and ambush and seize upon the city, for the Lord your God will deliver it into your hand. And that's what they did. And he says, it shall be when you have taken the city that you shall set the city on fire according to the commandment of the Lord shall you do. See, I have commanded you. Joshua therefore sent them forth, and they went to lie in ambush and abode between Bethel and Ai on the west side of Ai. But Joshua lodged that night among the people. And Joshua rose up early in the morning and numbered the people, and went up, and he and the elders of Israel before the people to Ai. He went before the people. He was a leader, leading from the front. And all the people, even the people of war that were with him, went up and drew nigh, and came before the city and pitched on the north side. So he took about 5,000 men and sent them to lie in ambush between Bethel and Ai on the west side. So they went up and they went to fight Ai. Joshua sent the men to Ben-Haven, which is the house of vanity, which was a place they worshipped idols and things like that. And this is why God is destroying these cities, because of the idolatry and the perversiveness, the sexual immorality that Tiffany mentioned last week. All this crazy junk that was going on. Fire purifies. That's why God used fire. Fire purifies as a symbol of purification. The Bible said that we'll be baptized in the Holy Ghost and what? Fire. Why? Because fire purifies. And God used fire to get rid of all this stuff that was evil and what? And then he said in Joshua 7:4 through 6, let not all the people. But I read that. And then they fled before the men of Ai, like Joshua said. And the men of Ai chased them before the gate, even unto Shemaram. And the defeat caused the people to lose heart the first time. And that's when they left. But Joshua, again, he rent his clothes. And then God tells them what to do. And they go and fight the battle. They seek God. God tells them how to fight the fight. Joshua draws these folks away. And they follow them. And then when Joshua gets out, he raises his hand. And this was kind of near daylight because they had to see what was going on. Then they attacked the city. And when they burned the city and the people of Ai had come out and looked back and see the city burned, they lost heart. They knew that they had been defeated, that it was over with. And then Joshua and his people turned against them. They had them in a crossfire, what we call today. So you had men behind them, had men in front of them, and they went back and they destroyed them and they killed them. And they burned the city. So Joshua did what the Lord said. They followed the Lord and they did everything that God told them to do and moved forward and defeated the people of Ai. Any comments or questions? So I like using PowerPoint because it keeps me on track a lot of times. But I like the end of that. Israel destroys Ai, and then number 5, Joshua builds an altar of stone in 8 and 30. He wrote a copy of the law of Moses on the altar. Joshua had a good memory because he read all of the law as was written. And there was nothing that Joshua did not follow in the law of the Lord. He followed it with his whole heart as Moses had commanded them. He did what he was told to do. He wanted to remind the folks of the law of God and to do what God had told him to do. What happened with the children of Israel as long as they followed God's laws?
They won every battle.
That's right. They won. They wasn't defeated. They were victorious. So on your paper, I want to go through a couple of these questions. A few of these questions. What instructions did God give to Joshua about defeating Jericho? So I give you the chapter and verse there. What did God tell him to do?
Walk around the city.
Walk around the city how many times?
6 times and then 7.
Right. That's what God told him to do. And we talked about that again. According to Joshua, who gave the city of Jericho over to the Israelites?
God.
God. What were the Israelites supposed to do with all the wealth of Jericho? And Tiffany mentioned this.
Leave it alone.
Take it to the church.
Put it into the treasury of the Lord. For what reason was Rahab's life spared?
She hid the spies.
Right. She hid the spies and she kept her mouth shut. There's an old saying in the Navy, loose lips sink ships. And she kept her mouth shut. She didn't say nothing. If she had spoken, God could have still delivered Jericho. But he used her. How did the fall of Jericho affect Joshua's reputation?
And more confidence in Joshua that he was there for God.
Because God had told him today, I'm going to magnify, I'm going to lift you up in the eyes of the people. I believe that they trusted Joshua. That's why when they went, he sent them to Ai just with a few. They trusted him because of what God had told them to do. Why do you think God chose this method for the Israelites to win the battle against the people of Jericho?
I think it was because he showed that it wasn't them. It was him that won the battle for them. And gave more confidence in God, that God was with them.
Right. Yeah. What happens when we think we win things? When people think that they're the sole reason for victory?
Pride.
And what does Scripture say about pride?
Pride comes from
Number
the
fall.
Yeah, we can get all arrogant and pride. I think that's why God lets us go through battles, to keep us humble. And it makes us stronger, and it makes us more dependent on Him. If we won every fight, would we be more likely to depend on God or not? If we never had troubles.
You wouldn't think you needed it.
Yeah, you wouldn't think you needed God, and you wouldn't think you needed Him to get through the things you go through. If everything was good. If you found favor at work every day you went, got a pay raise every month or every 2 months, and got extra benefits and all that, and you never had a difficult time at work, would you think there'd be a reason to seek God?
No.
I mean, why would you think you needed God? So I believe, like Quintel was saying, the reason that God had them do it, He wanted to show them that He was the reason for the victory. And that they needed to depend on Him no matter how many people they had, no matter if they were greater than the next fight, they still needed to depend on God. And in the next fight at Ai, how did God show that he was still leading them into victory when they got through the Achan thing and they won the battle?
They didn't win the first one, but they won the second.
Yeah, but how did he show them that he fought the fight for them? By drawing up the battle plans. He gave Joshua the battle plans. He told him what to do. Joshua just didn't go on his own experience or go on his own way, but because God told him what to do, God drew up the battle plans for this ambush. I mean, you can't fight every fight the same. Not two battles are the same, because if you fight every fight the same, what happens?
You get defeated.
The enemy gets wise to it. The enemy gets wise to what you're doing, and they know how to try to counterattack. So there's got to be a different fight, a different way to fight a battle. That's why even if some battles are similar in our spiritual walk with God, doesn't mean they're fought the same way. We've got to ask God for a battle plan. How do I fight this battle, God? This is similar to the last one, but it may not be the same way I need to attack this thing. How do I do it, Lord? How do I fight the battle? How do you imagine Joshua felt explaining to the Israelites the battle plans for their war against Jericho? I said something about that earlier. What do you think the facial expressions just you preach and you see people's body language and facial expressions on things, you tend to kind of read what's going on. How do you think him as a leader read some of the people's facial expressions when he told them, this is what God said we're going to do to Jericho and how we're going to fight this battle?
I know, it sounds crazy. So it's what he was trying to be like, I know.
I'm just saying, people like, have you lost your mind? This is ludicrous. We don't fight fights like this.
Even sometimes when a man or woman of God can instruct them to do something, and they still like, well, I don't understand it, but I'm gonna do it anyway. You told me to.
Right.
You know.
And surprisingly, when we read the story, we don't know for sure, but the Bible doesn't tell us that they gave him a hard time about it. It sounds like they went along with it pretty good.
Right. I just know the Israelites, there's probably some of them thinking, what
Yeah.
in the world are we doing?
Yeah.
You know, the Bible doesn't say that, but human nature
Yeah.
takes over
Yeah.
sometimes. And everybody didn't hear God say this.
Right.
But God, they trusted Joshua. I mean, they moved out and they did their mission and they won the battle
Yeah,
because
but
they
I bet
trusted the
Joshua
name of
hearing
God.
that from God was like, what? At first, like,
You know?
he trusts God, but he was also like,
Well, but he didn't second guess God. The Bible didn't say that either. He just did
but
it.
he's a human, you know.
But he, but Joshua was one when Moses went into the tabernacle, when Moses left, Joshua stayed in the presence of God. So Joshua knew God. He knew his voice and he knew him. And I think God was training him from that time till now to be the next leader of Israel and all. So how do you feel when God tells you to do something that you don't think your friends will understand or approve of? This is an application question.
If I know for sure it's God, I don't care. I think the hard thing is knowing for sure you are hearing from
Yes.
God and it's not yourself.
Right. And that's, people say things about fleeces, but man, sometimes you need that fleece to build your faith up.
Yeah.
To make sure it is God. I want to know when I have a thought on a message that it is God telling me to preach that message.
Right.
Because God knows who's going to be at church, knows what they need to hear, know what need to be said. I want to know it's God and not me. It's easy. I got sermon books at home. I could go pull out a sermon and put it together and preach it. I use them as commentaries. I don't like sermon. I don't like believing that word. I just don't like that word. Messages are harder to get because you got to pray fast and seek God and hear God's voice. But you're right. It is harder when you don't know, when you're not for sure it was God.
And I just want to say too, if I can,
Sure.
about Achan, I think God was so hard on him and the family, and to show the Israelites like how important it was to obey. Like, we're about to start all these battles and go into the land. We can't be doing it halfway, like some of you obeying, some of you not.
Right.
just like when he started the early church, you know, Ananias and Sapphira lied and they got struck dead. Well, that seemed hard. People lie today, they don't fall dead. But why then? Because the church was just getting started, it had to get started right. I think here, they're just getting started as a nation and going into Canaan, it had to be done right. And we can't have like people just doing their own thing out there, not obeying the law. That's part of me why I feel like it was such a thing for the whole family to have to die, the animals, like, get rid of every bit trace of sin. Can't have any leftover.
But they were, I think they were an accessory.
Yes.
They were part of
That
it. They knew, they didn't say anything.
Right,
And it cost people their lives.
that's right.
In combat, I mean, I've experienced it firsthand. When people do their own thing, it gets people killed.
Yes, yes.
When people do what they wanna do instead of doing what's supposed to be done, it gets people killed. And I know that commanders are not perfect, but I'm telling you, when we do things, we plan everything out. And we try to do it to the best to mitigate those circumstances. But when people do their own thing,
It's dangerous.
it blows up.
Yeah.
Things don't go. Thank you for listening. Thank you for participation. Bring your rest of your thing next week, and we'll move forward. Tiffany will be teaching next week on chapters 9, 10, 11, maybe 14, whatever she gets through. But thank you very much. God bless you, and have a great week.